Hello, I wanted to put together a quick video talking about the use of checkboxes in Rails. And basically, this is because one of the things is they come into play in the final project, and they can be a little bit tricky. So if you had noticed, as I hope you did, in the specification, you go down. There's an FAQ section, which is considered to be part of the specification because it clarifies aspects of it that common questions students have. Certainly, students often have trouble, as it says here, with spell classes. So each spell can have one or more classes, and here are possible design approaches mentioned. There is a repository here that has all sorts of examples for you, and I wanted to show you this in case you hadn't had the chance to take a look at it. So you'll see here, it's a public repository in this Checkbox Examples. It tells you a little bit about how to install it so that you can actually see it working. Of course, you could click through and read all the code directly here if you wanted to, but it is actually really nice to have a working app. And that's one of the things I want to show you, actually, is so the first thing it says is to get it running, you need to make yourself a new project with the 245 Spring 20 stack. And you may not have made projects of your own in Codio. So in Codio, you can click My Projects under Build. You can say you want a new project. And then you do not want to click Ruby on Rails. Don't click that. Click here. And you don't want an empty stack. You want to browse. And you'll see MSCI 245 Spring 20. And you can see how many of this stack has been created, a lot. That's from previous year of 245. This is your year. You've been using this new stack that I created. But I made the Checkbox Examples last year, and I have not updated it yet to work with your new stack. So you'll need to grab this old one. And let's call this, I'm going to call it Checkbox Examples. And I'm going to put a date on it so I know it's unique for this year. So you can just then create the project. And that starts up. I commonly get rid of these README files. I don't need them for anything. Yes, I want it gone. All right, great. So to clone it, come here. We make sure this is SSH. We copy this to our clipboard. We go back to Codio. We bring up a new terminal. And we get clone. And we paste in the link. And we say, yeah, we want to connect. And it's there. Then we change directory into the Checkbox Examples. And the first thing that we do is we run bundle install. Now, this is going to take a little while. And while it's running, what else do I have to say to fill the time? You may be wondering why I didn't have to specially name the directory. It's because when the project was created, I had named it what I wanted when I created the app. After an app's been created, you can actually have it in any directory that you want. It will still then hold that name at the time that you had made it. Coming back here, some things that we can start taking a peek at. So in database, with the migrations, this is an app that has students and clubs and a join table between them. For the students, each student has a name, an integer grade, And then they've got some Boolean flags. Are they special? Are they a visa student? Are they an honors student? Now, again, the schema doesn't here say anything about them being joined. What about clubs? Clubs, it's just each club has a name, and the join table is going to have a student ID and a club ID, and it's going to have it's a unique index here. All right, and it's a special create join, as we've seen before. We're still installing Rails. Anyway, once we run these migrations, these are the fancier statements that get created based upon those. This is still not exactly what's in the database, but we can basically see that, yes, in our join table, we'll have a club ID and a student ID and then the index on them. All right. Everything's great as we expected there. Do we seed the data? We do. We go ahead and we put in 3 clubs to get started. Now, why is this relevant to good old Spell Manager? The reason is we can think of students, all right, kind of being like a spell. Each student is like a spell, and each student can have membership in a club, just like we can add each spell can be a member of a spell class, so to speak, can have a spell class. And so this is this first design option here. All right, with the examples where we've got the Booleans. So then this also shows checkbox examples for Booleans, and that's like the second, pretty much it's like the second one. But you also saw checkbox Booleans in the Better Books homework, and so that's no different than that. So I'm actually going to focus on looking a little bit at the, all right, it's finally installed. And so now we can do Rails, we can create our database, we can migrate our database, and we can seed the database. And it takes a little bit of work for Rails to get this done. While that's happening, I'm going to come back up here, take a little bit more look at, oops, I lost it. Didn't mean to do that. That's a little strange. Go back to checkboxes in our app and see our models and see a student. Student is set up with an association, has and belongs to many clubs. And we'll see that clubs has and belongs to many students. Again, this is a classic many-to-many relationship. This is not actually set up with it as a total participation. So a student doesn't have to be a member of any club here. But when we have spells, each spell must have at least one class. The way that we enforce that is by having a presence of validation on the spell to make sure that it has at all times at least one spell class. Anyways, but we don't have that validation here because we don't need it. Great, so Codio has now made and migrated our databases and loaded things. And now we can run our server. Oh, I have to type Rails, not Rail. Common mistake for me. Set myself to the box URL here. And this comes up and we get to see our example. We go to our students. There's no students in the system yet. I didn't seed it with any. So we'll make a new student, Bob. Put him in grade 4. He's special. And let's say I don't, oh, what the heck? I'll put him in the chess club. Okay. And so Bob was created. That's wonderful. I can see he's in there now and he's part of the chess club. Let's edit him. Let's also say he wants to do some gardening. Update him and back. And we can see that he's into clubs. All right. It's kind of interesting. It's like, is there some special fancy way that all of this is working? Well, let's take it one step at a time, actually, here. What's the best way to look at this? I always like you get to see all the queries that are run when our server's processing things. We're just going to go into here, go app, and we already looked at the model, so there's nothing there much to see. We can see the controller. Let's take a look at the controller for students. Okay, some simple stuff to list all the students, to make a new student, to create. There's nothing much fancy looking here. Actually, just about everything is really, really, really boring in this. It's a really plain old CRUD interface for creating, updating, retrieving, updating, and deleting students. There is a very tricky thing here. This is about processing the clubs. Okay, so this is really unique. Both this little bit here where we have club IDs going to an array, whereas the others don't, they're just plain. And then actually taking and processing the club IDs, which is mapped to an array, and removing any of the elements of the array that are empty, okay, that are basically blank strings. So let's talk about why that is by going and taking a look at the view. So we'll go into here, into the students. Now, you know, we do a new student. Especially if we build things with scaffolding, which this was built with some scaffolding to help it. Yeah, we end up with a very empty view. There's not much in it. There's this special render of a thing called the form, and then this sort of mysterious student business. What's going on here? So render is a way for us to call another view from within a view and render that view. So we're going to render the form view. Well, notice it's this is kind of, it's like, really, that's its name. It's mind-boggling to me that Rails works this way. But when this is known as form is known as a partial. And partials begin with, the file name begins with an underscore and then has the name of the view. I mean, I still don't actually understand, or I can't remember why they do this. I find it very tricky to understand, but that's the way it works. If you don't do it, it's not going to work. What's this business with student? What we're doing here is we can create, this is giving a name of a variable. So the name of the variable will be student, and it'll be available while I'm rendering this form. So when I'm in that view, I'll have a variable student available to me, and it will be set to the value that is in this variable at student. At student is again coming from the controller, the student's controller. So for example, when we do a, where is the new? When we do a new, we make a member variable at student, and we set it to a brand new allocated student object. This is copied into the view here, but for us to get it to the form view that we're going to render, we have to send it along to it. And we do that by making a variable name and giving it a value. So let's go take a look at that now. So we're in here now, and we've got only thing in here is a form. We could have other stuff in here. You can have these partial views that you use, you can have any sort of little tidbit of code that you want. All right, so we're in here, and this is all the great fancy stuff for displaying errors with a form. Comes automatically with Rails when we do the scaffolding. Here we see our use of the select for the grades, and we actually just directly supply the array of the allowed grades right there in the form. We've got our Booleans. You've seen these before on the Better Books assignment. And then we're down here for the checkboxes for the clubs. And this code, I gotta tell you, is actually pretty confusing, but we can work our ways through it. So let's look at this collection checkboxes. I wish there was some sort of built-in help system, but there's not. But there is this great thing called Google. And as you can see, I've been to this site. I really quite like it. This is the documentation that tells us about what's really going on. And you can read this guy. What does it say? These are all sorts of examples, but it provides a number of methods for turning different kinds of containers or collections into a set of option tags where, yeah. So let's go down. And collection checkboxes is the first one. Don't know why sometimes I get a scroll bar and sometimes I don't. It drives me batty. Yeah, is there a way to get scroll bar back, please? There we go. All right, so we come down here, and this is the documentation for this guy. When we look at documentation, we got to learn not to skip over things. It's like reading mathematics. So this is really important. This shows me what the parameters are for calling the method. It's got it's going to take in an object as its first parameter. Next, it says it's got some method thing, then a collection, a value method, and a text method. We can pass in a hash table that's filled with options. We can pass in a hash table that's filled with HTML options. And this AND block, if you remember from the beginning of the course, shows that the thing's actually designed to also work with the works with blocks. But this is where we're able to basically pass in additional code that is actually run. All right, let's take it one step at a time. What does it say about the object? All right, so return checkbox tags for the collection of an existing return values of method for objects class. And so we've got to have some object that we pass in. On that object, we're going to tell this method the name. We're going to tell collection checkboxes the name of a method, all right, that we can call on the object to get the items that we want to use. So then it will get those items. All right. And, oh my goodness, it's so complex. Let's go back to here. Let's take a look at the code again. So I'm actually using form.collection checkboxes. And this is one of the things that's tricky about this. When you're doing form dot, I've already given it the object. So, wow. Then, yeah. So I've already given it the object because that object happens to be the object that's coming with the form with model, which is the student object. So I've got this student object. And this is one of the places where the documentation of Rails is a bit confusing, is it'll document this, but it doesn't actually make it easy for you to see the documentation for when you use it with the form with. So some of the documentation lags, or you're supposed to figure this out. It's just hard to figure out. Anyway, so this thing is the student object. All right. The method that we're going to call on that student object is the method called club IDs. And you're like, did we write a method called club IDs? And the answer is no, we didn't. Let me show you where club IDs comes from. So we need to go look at our models. And we're going to go look here at student. And you'll see there's no club IDs. This is, I've written something to write out all the clubs as a nice long string, but that's not what it is. But I did do this association, has and belongs to many clubs. And if you go and you read the documentation again for has and belongs to many clubs, you can actually see that it creates a whole bunch of methods. So let's go into our console here. I'm going to get the first student from the students table. All right, so S now holds the first student. And if you want to see all the methods on an object, you can type .methods. And it's nice to see them in sorted order. So then I'll sort them. And I get all of these methods here. Now, we made this association clubs. Okay, and it actually adds a lot of methods to it. And you can see all these sort of clubs being added in here. And so it should be in alphabetical order. And so, yeah, we'll see here, there's a method called club IDs, an assignment, and just plain old clubs, and assignment of clubs as string. All right, clubs as string, by the way, that's my method that I wrote. It's not one that came with it. Anyway, so let's take a look at what clubs does. So we call that, and you see it actually, it's an association, and it actually runs SQL code using the join table, where it's setting it to find the student ID 1, and it joins it with the clubs table. And we get to see back, and we get back this collection proxy, which is kind of behaves like an array of club objects then. So the club model, and we'll see that that student is in chess and in gardening. Okay. What is this club IDs? I see it runs. Oh, and it gives us back an array of 2 and 3. So that's kind of neat. We actually able to get back out exactly the IDs. All right. So let's go again and take a look at what we're doing here in this form. So we're going to call this collection checkboxes. It knows that it has a student object because I'm doing form dot. So that's the object. It knows it can call club IDs. Okay, those are for all the IDs. It can also then get the items that it wants for display purposes from club.all. So I supply all the objects possible. So this is all the clubs. They're in the I'm calling the model. So I'm getting all the clubs. And then what it needs to know is how should I display these? It's going to then call the ID method on a club and the name method on a club to be able to get those. This is what it's trying to actually set. Okay, so this is the item that we're going to be sending back. This is the string of the thing that we're going to be sending back and wanting to have be set. All right. And again, it's all a little tricky, but you can read through these. You can look at the examples. It's going to be a lot easier if we just simply go and we run. I'm going to quit here. And we're going to run our server. And what I want to do is in our, not our student, but our student's controller. So we do a new, but it's in the create. Let's go ahead, put BuyBug in here so we can actually see what's happening. Okay. So I'm going to come to my checkbox examples. I'm going to make a new student. This one we'll call Beth. Beth has made it to grade 12. Beth is an honors student who's in judo and gardening. Okay, create Beth. And it just pauses. Well, that's because I put the BuyBug in there. And we come back to the terminal. And you'll see, yep, we stopped right after the BuyBug. We have not yet executed this statement yet. But we can see all the variables that exist. So I'm just going to type params to look at what parameters have been sent in. So the parameters that have been sent in, we see are, I've got this student, and then it goes to, its value goes to a hash. And in that hash, name goes to Beth, grade goes to 12, special is 0, visa is 0, honors is a 1. Now club IDs is coming in as an array, okay? And it has a blank and a 1 and a 3. The 1 is first club and 3 is the other club, and then she's not part of the chess club. And so you might be wondering, why is this blank here? This blank is here. The way to see this is we'll need to come back, but basically we're going to get this club IDs array, and we do call student params, which is this method. We can call it here and just to see what it does. And you can see that it sucks out and returns only the items in the student portion of the params. And we've got a nice hash now with our things, and we've filtered the club IDs to strip out this blank. That was that code I showed you earlier in the video. All right, so let's just do continue to finish this up. And in fact, we did. We see that it runs and it creates, it does all these inserts. Some of the things that are really cool here, by the way, is that I guess it's, I don't know where to show it, but it is actually ending up, yeah, you'll see that there's a begin here and then a commit here. And so Rails has really neatly taken and put all of these SQL commands in as a single transaction. And so this new student doesn't exist in the students table alone. The student will not exist. It will all appear at once, basically, that the student's there and the join values. So it's not like the student is made and then we insert the clubs. Nope, it all comes as, it's like one whole unit because it's one transaction, which is really neat. But this is, you can see the actual SQL that's being run when we did that. All right, so I wanted to show you why there's a blank. So I'm going to refresh this, cancel. Let's actually just get it. So that shows us all the students. Let's make a new student. This time, Fred. We're not going to do that. I don't actually need to show you anything. I need to actually show you the page source. So this is a very common thing. By the way, what did I do? I maybe did it too fast. Somewhere in the blank part of the page, I right-click, and then I do View Page Source, okay? And you get to see what the HTML is that you're generating. And for this checkbox, what it runs and generates is it's got a hidden tag here, and it's the student club IDs, nothing in the array, and its value is blank. Rails does this because if someone doesn't check anything, so if they don't check judo, they don't check chess, they don't check gardening, HTML will not send in any value for student club IDs, okay? And so for anything to be sent in, we need to have something sent in. And so Rails always sends in by default a blank value so that we'll always have something to process. But that does also introduce the problem that we'll have a blank value. And we don't want the student to be joining a blank club. We want the student to only join the selected clubs. And so that's why we have to filter out the blank. All right. And so yes, this is the club IDs that we're specifying that we wanted when we made. This is the method. All right. So yep, all good. Whew, a lot of work to get this to work. But if you are taking the approach for checkboxes, so again, go back at our specification. So if you're going to follow this, like create a table to store the classes. So again, the thing to keep in mind here is that spell is like a student in our checkbox examples, and the spell class is like a club. Okay. And while I would love for you to fully understand all of the code that's happening here, it is a bit tricky to figure out. But this is basically a template you need to follow to get it to work. What's happening here, by the way, this is the block that we're actually sending into this method. And so this block then is run for every single checkbox. And so this allows us to, in particular, create the individual checkboxes and to supply HTML options. And so what we're doing here is we're supplying the HTML option to style the box and the label to make sure that they're in line rather than one on top of each other. And it's the same style little trick that I used up here. Okay. By default, they would be stacked vertically. That doesn't look the way the mock-up for the spell manager is. All right, so this is basically a long overview of walking through this example. But again, you can absolutely go and play around with this. You can grab it again from MSCI 245, 342 Checkbox Examples. It's in the specification. Once you're here, it's no problem at all. You just can copy to clone it. It's a public repository. But when you're in Codio to play around with it, you'll need to make a new project using the old stack. That's the important thing. And then, yeah, and then you could debug this to figure out how it's working and stuff, or you should be able to figure out how to map it. And again, this is just a many-to-many example. You actually have total parts. If you were to do this way for a join table, you'd need the total participation, which means all you need to do is attach a presence of. And by the way, you're like, how am I supposed to know that? One thing I want to point out is that this is covered recently. There was one time, it was back a month ago, but very recently, Chloe asked this, and I provided the following answer to people. And so, yep, you basically need a validates presence of validation on the association, and that solves it then. And so that would force, so we'd put this in the spell, and we'd validate the presence of whatever our spell classes are, so that it always makes sure that we can't have it be blank. And you're all right. That's all. I think that's all I needed to point out about the checkboxes. I really wanted that to be available to sort of go along with the example for people. All right, if you have any further questions, you can always follow up on Campus Wire.